could do a fan cast. I'm going to do a fan casting. Good change in my opinion because most of the X-Men movies mainly focused on Magneto as a villain. Yeah, no, absolutely. I heard that an X-Men movie is coming. MCU, the villain being Mr. Sinister. That was rumored for a while. The odds of that happening now seem fairly slim. That Mr. Sinister rumor. I believe we talked about that when the rumor was first broke some months ago. I think it was within the last year, but it's been a little bit. It was obviously before the writer and the actor strike. But yes, there is a rumor about Mr. Sinister being the big bad for the first proper X-Men movie. But we are not likely to have that proper X-Men movie for some time because they're going to do the theory goes that they're going to do a couple of smaller movies to build into that. Which, again, makes sense. It's kind of how they did the Avengers the first time. Technically, they started with the Hulk, but you can't really count that because the rights for that are so goofy, and then the whole Edward Norton debacle. But you start with Iron Man, and you build from there, and you do a couple of individual movies for the X-Men, and then you bring them together. At the end of, you do 2 or 3 individual stories. You do like a Cyclops and Jean movie, you do a Storm movie, and obviously you're going to do a Wolverine movie once they recast Hugh Jackman. And then once you have those movies, all of those movies conclude with Professor X bringing them into the school, and then the 4th movie is the big X-Men movie, which then would make sense to bring in somebody like Mr. Sinister. The Magneto thing, I think the Magneto element is always going to be a factor because that's the way it is in the comics, really. I mean, largely what most of the fandom, because large swaths of the Marvel fandom are casual readers, most of the fandom, their basis for knowledge of the Marvel universe largely comes from the cartoon. So if it was in the cartoon, then that's where they're going to be starting from. So if you keep some sort of background reference to the things they already know, I mean, Sinister was in the cartoon as well, so that helps. But the Magneto thing, Magneto and Professor Xavier being so close and kind of the two sides of the same coin, if you have that constantly in the background, you're doing a couple of things beneficial to the MCU. You're doing you're keeping that tie to the comic books that people remember well. You're keeping the tie to the cartoon that the people remember well. You're also maintaining a villain for multiple movies, which Marvel has had a horrible track record with doing that because they can't. For whatever reason, the only villain they've been able to do that with was Magneto, and that was in the Fox movies, and those movies were not that good. And even then, not all of them were Magneto. They made Magneto into a good guy for a minute, and that didn't sit quite right with the fandom either. So, yeah, with Beast and the Marvels, yes, they're going to build into it slowly. I think Feige is going to look at the last couple of phases of the MCU and see where he's failed, because it's kind of a Hail Mary pass at this point because Marvel is hemorrhaging so much money. Like, he has to recreate his success, and his only option to recreate that success is a Hail Mary pass to build up this new X-Men universe, if you will, the X-Men portion of the Marvel universe. And the best way to do that is to repeat the game plan from when you originally started, and that was very much piecemeal. But part of that, though, like, it's a different landscape in many respects, but the biggest respect in which it's a different landscape as far as Kevin Feige is concerned is that one of the biggest reasons why it was so piecemeal at the beginning is because they didn't know if they were going to make money. Because Iron Man, when Robert Downey Jr. was cast as Iron Man, it was great casting to begin with, but it was Iron Man was like a B-list or a C-list character at the time. So Disney had the rights to make this movie for a character that wasn't super well known at the time, so they were taking a big gamble. Now, the comic, a lot of these characters, maybe not the books themselves, but the characters that come from the books are a lot more familiar with people because people go down Wikipedia deep dives, or they just, brush up on their cartoon because that's a lot easier than reading a book, right? So a lot of the characters are a little bit more well known now, so you're not taking as much of a risk. So we probably won't get the same kind of piecemeal. It won't be so far between movies. It won't be as big of a gamble every time. But I think he's going in with a similar mindset in that we have to do this slower than we tried to with the Marvels. We have to do this more deliberately and more directed than we've done for the last two phases, because those two phases have lost us more money than we spent buying these properties at this point. So, I think that is the best way for them to go. And I think that is the way that Feige will go, honestly.